Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to a Memorial Day edition of the Post Up. I am your host, David Grubb, here on Boot Crew Media. So, we're going to start with something that feels like it might be a further indication that Zion Williamson is building a relationship with the front office of the New Orleans Pelicans and wants to stay with the Pelicans long term. Of course, that is up to Joe Dumars. But on Joe Dumars' birthday last week, we saw Zion Williamson repost the Pelicans' message to Joe wishing him a happy birthday. That didn't happen during the David Griffin era. And I don't want to go back and discuss their relationship, but certainly all the way back to Zion's rookie season, there were reports that Zion and Griffin did not get off on a great first impression. And then it just kind of deteriorated or became a stalemate from there, where they never really got any closer, that the front office and Zion never really embraced each other. And I think you saw evidence of that by some of the things that happened with the Pelicans, whether it was the team mural with Brandon Ingram in the center or Zion never really being introduced last during player introductions, which was very unusual for a first overall pick. You just didn't see the kind of deference to Zion that you would see in other organizations, which I think spoke to the relationship between Griffin and his star. Well, it seems that since Joe Dumars has taken over, that Dumars has been a lot more interested in building that relationship with Zion. He talked about during his press conference, his introductory press conference, that he had already spoken with Zion. You saw him appear at the Pelicans as the Pelicans representative at the NBA draft lottery. And now you're seeing this, where Zion sending a message to Joe of congratulations on another birthday. I don't think those are giant steps, but they are important steps if Zion Williamson is completely bought into the future of the Pelicans. And I think the questions that it arouses is, what does Joe Dumars plan to do with that relationship? Does he plan to foster it and give Zion the kind of power that goes along with a lot of franchise players in trying to shape a roster around him, in even trying to improve or change the coaching staff? Does Zion have that kind of power within the organization now if he goes to Joe Dumars and says what we're doing offensively and defensively doesn't work for me? Does Dumars contact Zion to ask him about players and potential trades just to see and gauge his opinion? I think you would do that naturally. But if you were planning on moving a player of Zion's caliber, I don't think you'd continue to gain his input. I don't think you'd put him in these positions of putting him out as the franchise player. So it clearly seems that Joe Dumars has embraced Zion Williamson. And from all observations at this point, it looks like Zion Williamson is embracing Joe Dumars. If you're the New Orleans Pelicans, whether that's a short-term situation that impacts the next 3 years of Zion's contract, or if it's a long-term situation where Zion ends up finishing his career in New Orleans, I think we'll look back to these kinds of small gestures as the beginning of that relationship. If it deteriorates otherwise, I think it'll be more about what happens on the court and just either an inability for Zion to stay healthy or for the Pelicans to not be able to put a winning team around him that will ultimately doom this relationship. But it doesn't seem at this stage that Zion Williamson and Joe Dumars are on different pages. And I think ultimately that's a good thing for the New Orleans Pelicans. All right. One of the big topics this offseason has been the future of Herb Jones. And once again, other teams are reportedly sniffing around the New Orleans Pelicans to see what a potential deal for Herb Jones would look like. His name comes up frequently whenever teams are looking at offseason targets because Herb Jones is one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, and he has a very team friendly contract. You can go and check last Thursday's episode of the Post Up for a more in depth look at Jones's value to the Pelicans, because Herb is exactly the kind of guy that contenders want in order to make a deep run in the playoffs. You've seen how much defensive versatility on the wing has been important during this postseason, and there are very few perimeter defenders as capable and as versatile as Herb Jones. But here's where things get interesting, of course. The Pelicans have already had their big shift in the front office. David Griffin out. He brought Herb Jones in as a second-round draft pick, and Joe Dumars has stepped in to lead basketball operations. You can look at Dumars' history, and while he inherits this roster, none of these players are his players. He hasn't drafted any of them. He's made no commitments to any of them. So certainly, if he wants to move this roster and make changes, it would be within his right as the new executive in charge. He has to also figure out who fits next to Zion Williamson for the long term. So that's where this uncertainty about Herb Jones creeps in. His short contract with only 2 years remaining on it, and you add into that Herb's rehab from a torn labrum in his right shoulder. That hasn't scared off teams. I think that they feel like teams can buy Herb low while there's some changes going on in the Pelicans front office, potentially in their coaching staff down the road, and potentially with Zion Williamson. If there are changes with the Pelicans, then folks want to be in on the ground floor of trying to take advantage of a fire sale. But as I talked about last Thursday, I do believe at this stage, moving Herb Jones would be a big mistake for the Pelicans. He is ultimately the best defender on this team by far, and his impact on that end cannot be understated for a team like the Pelicans. Every night he takes out the opposing team's best player on offense. He's done it to some of the very best in this league and made them look bad in the process. And more often than not, Herb Jones is at the center of shutting down the opponent. He's also improved his offensive game year to year, except for last year. His last full season, he shot over 41% from three. It was almost a 50-40-90 guy. He was very prolific from the corner in particular. Herb also is the kind of player who doesn't complain. He doesn't need plays drawn up for him. Herb is just a guy who comes into the gym every day and works hard. And on a team where players don't always bring it, especially on the defensive end, you have to have somebody like Herb Jones to at least provide a consistent effort on the defensive end, but also set the tone in the locker room for what a professional is. The Pelicans have very few of those players. It's CJ McCollum, it's Herb Jones, and I would say it's Trey Murphy as well. But those are really the standard bearers for what it means to be a professional. Herb and Trey are the same age. CJ is on his way out. So finding a way to make sure that Herb Jones stays within the circle is very important for the Pelicans. And again, he exemplifies the kind of player characteristics that Joe Dumars has said and has shown that he values. If anybody would have fit on those Pistons teams that contended for the Eastern Conference and made it to the finals twice, it would have been Herb Jones. He's certainly one of those guys. Or he could have played on the Bad Boys Pistons, very much like a Joe Dumars, a quiet, unassuming guy who goes about his business every day and still is one of the top performers at his position. Nobody on this roster is untouchable, of course, except for maybe Zion Williamson as you look at him. But even he, there seems to be a level that you could have him for. There seems to be a package that you could go in and get Zion Williamson. But if you're the Pelicans and you're serious about rebuilding this roster, I think that there are other places to look. You don't trade away right now your best defender and your tone setter unless somebody's giving you a lot in a return, especially in future returns. If somebody is willing to give you a ton in tradable assets, particularly draft picks, then of course you have to consider it because you do need a war chest that you've already depleted from the Los Angeles Lakers trade. All of that stuff is gone. You've just got the picks that you control essentially from the Bucks going forward. That's your war chest. The Pelicans need to add more to it, especially as a small market team. This is where you find your extra swings at bat because you're not going to find those in free agency. If you get an offer you can't refuse, again, the Pelicans have to consider it. But otherwise, Herb Jones is the kind of player that it seems that Joe Dumars wants to build around and not put in trade talks immediately. The bottom line is, yes, teams are calling. They're going to continue to call about Herb Jones. But I believe in the short term, at least for one more season, the Pelicans will not answer that call. All right. Let's go to let's switch gears to the NBA draft, and we'll talk about one of the most intriguing guard prospects in this year's draft, Oklahoma freshman Jeremiah Fears. Now, I know folks don't always keep up with college basketball. It's a lot less interesting than it has been in the past as we kind of look for superstars to emerge very quickly. But if you watched even a couple of games last season, you heard about Jeremiah Fears, and that's because simply he can play really well. He's listed at 6'4", around 180 pounds, but what makes him special isn't his size. It's a lot more about the intangibles when it comes to Jeremiah Fears. His ability to control the game. His game is characterized as poised, smooth, and very crafty. Those are important traits to have in a point guard. particularly a guy who's more of a lead guard than just a distributor. As a freshman, he averaged about 17 points, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds per game. The numbers were solid, but they didn't jump off the page for you. But it's the feel that he plays with, I think, that stands out. When you talk about the intangibles again, his IQ, he's not super explosive, but he's got great footwork for a player his size, excellent body control, and he has a deep bag when it comes to scoring in traffic. He knows how to get shots off. He knows how to read defenses. Even amongst taller defenders, he's able to get a shot off. His three-point shooting was not great. He shot below 30% from deep, about 28% for the season. But in his favor, he did shoot over 85% at the free throw line. So that shows that his touch is ultimately there. And he was one of the youngest players in college basketball last season at just 18 years old. That jumper should come around. His last game on a big stage was a very good one. It was in the NCAA tournament against UConn, the two-time defending champs. Oklahoma State didn't win that game, but Fears played very well in it. He dropped 20 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists while going a perfect 8 for 8 at the free throw line. And he did get better as his freshman season went along. Over his first 17 games in college basketball, he averaged about 17 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals while shooting 47% from the floor. He picked that up over his final 10 games, which included the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament, where he boosted his numbers up to 22 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, and improved his three-point shooting up to 33%. So Fears has been rising on draft boards pretty quickly over the last few weeks. Some mocks have him going as high as 5th or 6th overall, but most have them anywhere between 5 and 10. So Fears, when you talk about the players that he could be similar to, he himself talks about modeling his game after Kyrie Irving. You could kind of see that in his handle, his ability to read defenses offensively, and how he changes pace with his dribble and his speed. There is also a little bit of flair in his game. He is a showman, to be sure. If you're looking for other comps, the ones that are most consistent are guys like De'Aaron Fox, Markelle Fultz, and even a little bit of Jalen Brunson, though not as physical as Brunson. Not identical players ultimately, but similar in about how they pick their spots, use angles rather than just over dominating speed and quickness, and they are able to run an offense while keeping their heads about them. The biggest deficiency for him is his inefficiency. He's one of the least efficient guards in the country in college basketball when it came to playmaking last season. He graded in the 95th percentile in assists per game, but was 28th in the nation in assist to turnover ratio, which is not good. 20th percentile, excuse me. His agility and his acceleration are also concerns for him at the combine. His overall speed and vertical jump are solid, but as a defender, his physical attributes have been compared to a guy like Kirk Heinrich, which isn't bad. Kirk Heinrich was a decent defender, a solid defender, but not all NBA level. Though you're not taking somebody like Fears for his defensive production. Though you want to see at the NBA level at least be some resistance. The Pelicans have struggled at point of the attack defense, and that's where Fears looks like he'll struggle, as all point guards do early on in their NBA careers. Overall, when you look at Jeremiah Fears, he's ultimately viewed as a low floor. He's not going to give you a ton his rookie year, but a high ceiling project that'll experience growing pains with average athleticism and elite scoring ability. He's one of the youngest players in the draft, as we talked about, which means he possibly has a significant amount of room for improvement. So what does that mean in relation to the New Orleans Pelicans, who are picking 7th? If you're the New Orleans Pelicans, you at least consider Fears. With DeJounte Murray, you're going to miss a lot of time recovering from his Achilles injury. There's certainly a clear need in this backcourt. CJ McCollum has never been suited to the point guard duties. Jose Alvarado is a career backup, and that's fine. He's good in that role. The Pelicans could use a young guard who can both score and facilitate. Fears does both of those things. The bottom line is that Fears is a very complete guard. He's confident. He's coachable. He shows up in big games. wherever he goes in the top 10, he's certainly a player to watch. The Pelicans also met with him at the combine, so they have some familiarity and some interest, it seems, in Jeremiah Fears. If the Pelicans do ultimately decide to go with solidifying the backcourt and looking at their long-term development, I think that Jeremiah Fears is very much in the conversation for them at 7. I think ultimately, if you do take a Jeremiah Fears, you do have to go look on the free agent market for a veteran point guard to teach him the position, and that's not Elfrid Payton. I'm sorry. And folks would just say, why am I picking on Elfrid? But it's just that that's the roster spot that you have. And I think if you have injury down the road, I think then you can deal with bringing Elfrid back. But I think if you have Fears, if you get Jeremiah Fears, I think that it hastens the kind of need for potentially going out and getting Chris Paul and bringing him back to New Orleans to teach Fears the finer points of that point guard position and hopefully be the kind of player that the Pelicans can utilize in that point guard position for years to come. All right. Um, Lastly, as we go on, one of the other um, conversations as far as player acquisitions for the New Orleans Pelicans has centered around Kristaps Porzingis, the Boston Celtics center. After a disappointing into the Celtics season, there's been a lot of chatter about who the Celtics might move, and the 7'3" Latvian is one of the guys in the center of that. The Pelicans have been floated as a possible landing spot for Porzingis. On paper, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Porzingis has 1 year remaining on what was a 2-year, $60 million contract he signed last year. But the Celtics are so deep into the luxury tax, they may owe more than $100 million just in luxury tax payments. So something has to give for Boston. And it looks like either Drew Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis are the odd men out. So, what would this look like? A potential deal with the Pelicans. According to one of the trade proposals floating around, it would take something like Herb Jones and Kelly Olynyk to get that deal done. That is a big price. You're talking about Pelicans giving up their best perimeter defender in an area where they struggle, and a homegrown guy at that, who's, as we just talked about, embodies the culture that Joe Dumars is trying to build for a much higher priced player who's injury prone, though he is 7 foot. And you also would get in this deal sharpshooting reserve guard Peyton Pritchard. Porzingis has appeared in only 99 of a possible 164 regular season games for the Celtics over the last 2 seasons. His playoff contributions have been inconsistent, though when he's on the floor, he certainly is a difference maker. The Pelicans would also have Porzingis again for just 1 season, meaning they could lose him for nothing in free agency. And you would have to imagine that Porzingis, unless the Pelicans are willing to overpay him on an extension, would be looking to go to a team and win another championship as he already has with the Celtics. He's at 30, which would, for him and a lot of guys, once you're over 7 foot and you play the kind of position that Porzingis that relies on athleticism, you go back to his years with the Knicks, who really moved on from him and sent him to Dallas because of his potential long-term injury outlook. He goes to the Wizards, he goes to the Celtics, still can't play an overwhelming majority of the games, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get better as he gets older. But what is the case for making a Porzingis deal? Well, if on paper, if you just want to look at it as what are his traits, Porzingis gives the New Orleans Pelicans legitimate rim protection, something that they've needed obviously for years since Anthony Davis left. He spaces the floor. He shot 39% from three over the last 3 seasons, which could open up the paint for Zion certainly to do what he does. And when healthy, Porzingis is going to give you 20 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks every night. The fit next to Zion is certainly intriguing. If this were NBA 2K, you'd be really excited about it. Offensively, they do complement each other. Porzingis' ability to stretch the floor and play the high post on offense could allow Zion, again, that ability to come off screens and play downhill. Defensively, Zion, again, playing more of a perimeter role, even guarding point guards last year, you would have that wall behind you in Porzingis. Um, though he does not have a tremendous amount of physical size, he's obviously extremely tall and rangy as a defender. One of his best attributes when he came into the NBA, he was ahead of, as much as he's been a unicorn offensively, he was a dominant defender early in his career. That long injury history, though, is the one thing that'll test you and your risk tolerance if you're Joe Dumars. He missed most of the Celtics playoff run with calf and ankle injuries. And if you're the Pelicans, who've already dealt with a ton of injuries with Zion Williamson alone, let alone the rest of this roster over the last several seasons, do you really want to take the chance and roll the dice on another big with a long list of medical red flags? I think, again, letting go of Herb Jones in that deal just doesn't make sense. If it could be CJ McCollum, per se, who you'd be giving up to the Celtics, who also is at the end of an expiring deal, and would go to the Celtics and give them that offense if they're able to move Drew Holiday, and they go for a year with CJ McCollum getting off of that contract eventually at the end. The same with Olynyk, who's at the expiring end of his deal. If you could do that, then that would make more sense rather than giving up Herb Jones, who only makes $15 million, and along with Kelly Olynyk, who makes slightly more than $10 million. Yeah, it would make the salaries match up, but I think the Pelicans are ending up giving up more value because Olynyk will at least be there health-wise. He's not shown a propensity to be injured. So you have a big who's available to you, though he isn't a shot blocker. He is a veteran who understands the game and has a high basketball IQ. And you're giving up Herb Jones, perhaps your highest basketball IQ on this roster and your best defender, before you get to find out how this works under the Joe Dumars regime. There's also would be the question of how he would fit in Willie Green's offense. Can Willie Green utilize Kristaps Porzingis offensively, especially with the potential departure of James Borrego? Are the Pelicans going to maximize whatever they would get from Porzingis on that end of the floor? Are you going to be able to get that 20-8 without a great lead guard and without a bunch of players who are great at creating for someone like Porzingis? The bottom line is that, yes, there's upside to that deal. A healthy Porzingis would make the Pelicans better, but that cost, both in the players and the potential risk, to me is just too steep. If the Pelicans want to take a home run swing, if you want to go for the fences this year, which I think would be premature, then sure, listen to what the Celtics have to say. But it would have to come with a clean bill of health, which is impossible for Kristaps Porzingis at this phase of his career. And it would take a lot of internal discussion as to what you're going to plan to do on the perimeter defensively, and how do you replace that effort of Herb Jones? And then what do you do as far as having a true lead guard? Because Peyton Pritchard is a great shooter, but I don't know if you feel comfortable at his size and his ability to having him run your offense for long stretches. He's a sixth man. And if you take him on, you're basically nullifying Jose Alvarado's role on this team. So you'd have to move him as well, though I understand there are folks who'd be happy to see that. But you'd imagine that Alvarado's a better defender than Peyton Pritchard. So if you make this move, it would signal a major shift for the Pelicans, and really would be much more of a win now move for the Pelicans than a long-term move for this team. All right, that's going to do it here on this Memorial Day. I hope you all enjoy it, and I hope you celebrate it with reverence. I got to give a shout out to my uncle who did pass away in the Vietnam War. I never really got to meet him, but he's somebody that every year you remember sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our nation. So to all those who have lost their lives and the family of those who have lost their lives, I wish a solemn and honored Memorial Day for you. It's tough to say happy Memorial Day. It doesn't really feel happy when you're trying to remember folks who lost their lives. So I think just have a solemn and respectful Memorial Day. I'll be back tomorrow in studio for another edition of the Post Up. Until then, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode of the Post Up right here on Boot Crew Media. Y'all be good.